Michelle used her pinky to clear the smudge of mascara on her eyelid, dabbing until the black fleck blended into the shadows of her deep-set eyes. The entryway mirror reflected the woman's delicate face while she practiced her smile. No, too excited. She touched her hair and tried again, this time keeping her lips tight over her teeth. No, too forced. She checked the clock's reflection and tried once more, opting for more of a raised eyebrow and tilted head combination. Good enough. It was nearly 10 o'clock in the morning, but Michelle knew her sister-in-law was still asleep. To her knowledge, Murphy hadn't left her room since their disagreement the night before. This was typical. Michelle grabbed her purse and jangled the car keys. "Boys," she called up the stairs, "I'm taking your aunt shopping. Don't forget to feed the dog." Michelle had, of course, already fed the dog, but it was all she could think of on the spot. She looked over to Murphy's bedroom door. Still no signs of life. Michelle gracefully decided to give up on tact for the sake of time and walked over to tap on the door. "Murphy, are you almost ready?" she sang. There was no verbal response, but she heard a faint groan and stepped back. Sure enough, a few moments later, a disgruntled figure opened the bedroom door. Murphy was barely taller than Michelle's 13-year-old son Noah, and her attitude could have placed her among his classmates easily. She was much older than Michelle, with several streaks of gray hair in her matted elbow-length dreadlocks. Her tan skin looked just like Michelle's husband's, not only in color, but in its deep, sun-hewn wrinkles. However, Michelle's husband had earned his leathered skin through years of hard labor building their company. Murphy, on the other hand, had gained hers from countless days on street intersections, selling cheap flowers, among other things, to drivers behind tinted windows. Michelle raised her eyebrow and tilted her head just as she had rehearsed. "Ready?" Michelle asked. "I've got a fun day planned for us." Murphy grunted, shuffled past her, and kicked on a pair of sandals by the door that might have been green at one point. She wore ripped jeans, a black tank top, and a yellowing flannel. The same outfit from the night before, with the same tomato sauce stain crusted on her sleeve. Michelle couldn't tell if Murphy had slept in the grimy combo all night, or had just put it back on when she woke up. Moving past the interaction with a sigh, Michelle unlocked the front door and stepped out into the warm Florida sun, just as a thundering down the stairs heralded the arrival of her own two sons. "Bye, Aunt Murph!" shrieked the younger son, Joel, jumping out the front door and onto his aunt's back. Michelle's jaw tweaked, and she massaged it with her manicured nails. Murphy wheezed from the weight of her nephew and smiled for the first time that morning. Michelle reminded herself how proud of her sweet boy she was. They had welcomed their estranged aunt like a puppy off the street. Even her dirtiest habits were endearing. Everything in Michelle longed to sit her sons down and explain just what kind of person their beloved aunt really was. A divorced, cheating, drug-dealing... Father, forgive me. She stopped and blinked several times to purify her mind. Her gaze shifted down towards the pouch of shirt fabric peeking above her waistband. Sucking in her stomach, she pulled her pants up to swallow it. "Go inside, boys, you don't have shoes on. We'll be back this afternoon. No TV until you finish your homework." Michelle gave her sons the same practiced quasi-smile, but they didn't fall for it. She'd been trying so hard not to take out her pent-up frustration on them. It wasn't their fault Murphy was a force of corruption. She focused on Noah, searching to see if his nails were still painted, but his arms were folded, and his soft features hardened the longer she looked. "Come on, don't piss off your mom," Murphy laughed, dropping Joel inside the threshold and reaching over to playfully push Noah inside as well. He grinned back at her and closed the front door. The nail polish was, thankfully, gone. Michelle spun on her heel and walked towards the minivan. Once inside, she cranked up the air. Murphy climbed into the passenger seat, and she took off down the road without waiting for her to put on her seatbelt. "I'd appreciate it if you didn't curse in front of the boys." "What are you talking about?" Murphy asked, picking at the dried red stain on her sleeve. "John told me you hate cursing. I haven't said one thing the whole time I've been here." "I was right there when you did it. You told the boys you were going to..." Her voice dropped low. "Piss me off." "Jesus Christ, Michelle." She leaned back in her seat, and Michelle could feel her rolling her eyes. "Piss is not a bad word." "See, there's another one. We do not take the Lord's name in vain. And please put your seatbelt on," she asserted. "Oh my God, are you kidding? Fine, I just won't talk anymore. How's that? That's not what I said. But also, you just did it again. I'm not trying to be the bad guy here. I'm just worried about the boys. Michelle turned her attention back to the road, braking at a red light just in time. Oh no, not the boys, Murphy crooned in mock concern. What's gonna happen when they hear someone say fuck for the first time? Their virgin ears probably won't be able to handle it. She leaned over the console to get in Michelle's face. Murphy, you don't even know them, Michelle. Have you tried to actually get to know your kids instead of having a panic attack whenever someone shits on your walls? Do you even know that Noah has a boyfriend? Michelle felt her stomach begin to boil over. No, he does not have a boyfriend. I don't know where you heard that. His name is Dylan. Noah isn't gay. He's 13, Michelle kissed. She closed her eyes for just a moment and slid her free hand down the front of her shirt, pulling out the necklace from beneath her collar and recentering its small cross charm. The light's green, Murphy said. Michelle's eyes snapped back open and she drove on. And yes, he is gay. He told me about Dylan yesterday. They're in band. Michelle choked on her own tongue, jailing her rage behind her teeth. I don't want to talk about this anymore, she replied after a minute. We're just going to get you some nice clothes for your interview. She looked over at Murphy, prepared to stand her ground, but her sister-in-law was slumped in her seat like an old balloon and didn't say another word. Unsatiated by the silence, Michelle got her revenge at each traffic light, braking at the last possible moment. The click of the seatbelt safety mechanics was like stifled laughter, and the red lights winked at her every victory until they finally reached the Macy's parking lot. Gum? Michelle opened a package of sugar-free peace offerings. Another grunt, and Murphy got out of the car, rubbing her sore neck without commenting on Michelle's driving. Michelle rolled her eyes and returned the gum to her purse. The rotating doors of the Macy's entrance were guarded by a young woman in a red baseball cap, her arms full of flyers. She prowled the doors like a lioness. A mother with 2 young children bounded out the exit, avoiding eye contact in case the huntress sensed weakness and pounced. Yet, pounce she did on the mother's young, and stuffed flyers into their arms. One floated in the damp Atlantic breeze, landing a few feet in front of them. Murphy bent down to pick it up. He looks like an orangutan, she mused. Michelle stopped and turned to look at her sister-in-law. Excuse me? This guy, he looks just like an orangutan, don't you think? Murphy insisted, holding out the flyer for Michelle. No, I don't think that, Michelle said without looking down. That's an awful thing to say about someone just because you don't like what they stand for. How am I supposed to know what he stands for? It's just a picture, Murphy murmured, pulling the flyer back and gazing down at it. There was no way Murphy was as naive as she pretended to be. But out of the corner of her eye, Michelle could see that the flyer really didn't have any policy information on it at all. Just a picture and a slogan in giant white letters. But he's the Republican candidate, Michelle said at last, gesturing to the little elephants marching along the bottom. Oh, so are you voting for him? Murphy asked, while they walked down the torrid pavement. Yes, of course, she replied. As they approached, the young campaigner displayed her glimmering fangs in a blinding smile. No doubt assuming Michelle's clean appearance already made her an ally to the cause, she turned her attention to Murphy and extended another flapping flag of information. Good morning, ma'am. Have you decided who you're voting for? She asked with the pep of a high school cheerleader. Yes, thank you, Michelle interrupted before Murphy could reply, and swept past the girl's outstretched arm. The crisp, conditioned air was a welcome feeling, and Michelle paused to take in the sight. The cool terrazzo cut a path through the plush red carpet, leading from department to department in the never-ending sea of fabrics. Ahead, the sweet aroma of mingling perfumes wafted towards her, and she breathed in the air with fervor. In front of the entrance, a group of spotless white mannequins stood with popped hips, each sporting a different coat from a new designer collection on this 80-degree October day. She glided past the perfumes, through the men's section, and towards the clearance racks, turning to see what options Murphy would gravitate towards, but her sister-in-law was nowhere in sight. Letting out a huff, Michelle turned in a slow circle, looking for her millstone. As she searched, she noticed that there was hardly anyone else in the store. Michelle was used to working around crowds on Saturday mornings like this. Usually the racks were in disarray from the women who couldn't come any other day of the week, and the path was crowded by loitering adolescents whose body spray drowned the sweet perfumes. But today no one else was in sight, except a woman several yards away, staring at her. Michelle would never admit it, but she liked when people looked at her. She knew she was attractive for her age, but did this woman have no self-awareness at all? Not even the decency to look away when she was caught? Michelle went to raise her hand in greeting and saw that the woman mimicked her movements exactly, even down to the uncertain pause as both women realized what was happening. There was no other woman. It was her own reflection in the column's mirror. Bemused and embarrassed, Michelle let out a shaky laugh and looked around again to check for anyone who might have seen. Seeing no one, she walked towards herself to examine what had become of her appearance since leaving the house. The lighting was flattering. Macy's had always provided that excellent service to her, but it also highlighted the halo of humidity-induced frizz around her head. At some point, she must have begun to slouch because her purse had shifted from neatly resting on her shoulder to hanging lazily at her elbow. Taking a moment to correct herself, she circled the column mirror, admiring how real her counterpart looked when she stood so close. In the reflection, she saw some disturbance far off behind her. She allowed her eyes to focus on it and remembered why she'd wandered from the clearance section to begin with. Through the inverted image of the glass doors, she could see Murphy standing outside the store, leaning against a large planter, smoking. Of course she was smoking, and talking to the peppy leaflet girl. In one hand, Murphy held her cigarette, and in the other, one of the girl's flyers, which she was waving about. Michelle turned around and began heading toward the exit, before stopping to think by the mannequin display. Smoking certainly wasn't allowed in her house, or the store, so if Murphy needed to do it, outside would be the only option. Michelle also couldn't read the look on Leaflet Girl's face. She was not shutting down the conversation, but her look did not imply affability. Well, whose would, with Murphy being dressed the way she was? As Michelle stood there watching, a security guard strode past her and outside with Murphy and the girl. Michelle held her breath and watched as the security guard stepped up to her sister-in-law, gently pulling her off the planter, and gestured out to the parking lot. Michelle's husband had been like Murphy when they first started dating, and she had gone through this experience enough times to know that Murphy was being told off for smoking outside the entrance. The security guard undoubtedly thought she was some homeless woman looking for air conditioning and bothering the campaigner. Murphy pushed the man's hand off and flung her hair back. Shock, embarrassment, and an odd satisfaction kept Michelle rooted to her spot, frozen and disguised amongst the mannequins. It was only when Murphy turned to gesture inside and the guard spotted Michelle that she was finally called to action. Feigning surprise as if she had just found her misplaced glasses, she walked towards them and out into the humidity, dried by the stink of cigarette smoke. "Officer, thank you so much. I was looking everywhere for this one," Michelle chuckled, grabbing Murphy by the elbow. "Oh," said the security guard, bewildered, giving the two women a strange look. "Either way, I can't have you smoking right here by the entrance. There's an area right down there," he said, gesturing towards a trash can and ashtray combo several yards away. "There's no need. I think she's finished," Michelle said, attempting to drag her sister-in-law back inside. "Jesus, it's fine, Michelle. I'll just go down by the trash can," she said. But instead, she flicked the cigarette out of her hand and stepped on it, turning back to face Leaflet Girl. "As I was saying, how does he feel the need to control who gets married to who?" "Well," began Leaflet Girl, readjusting the ponytail sticking out of her hat and looking between Michelle and the security guard, "we believe that families are the foundation of this country, and marriage is the foundation of family." "Okay, but that didn't answer my question. If this whole Republican thing is about less government control, then why did they decide who can get married?" Murphy asked. Michelle felt the blood rushing into her cheeks. She tried to let out a laugh, but all that came out was a stifled puff of air that caught no one's attention. The security guard leaned against the wall, arms folded. "I don't know politics, but I'll always catch a lie. It just sounds like a double standard." Murphy waved the fly around again. "Honey, my nephew is gay, and he's the best kid you can imagine. Smartest 13-year-old I've ever met, funny as hell, and," she boasted with a wink, "he's pretty much Van Halen on the trumpet." Michelle's mouth felt filled with cotton, but she found her voice before Murphy could speak again. "He's not gay," Michelle pleaded, looking to the security guard for backup. "He's just quiet." "I'm right there with you," the security guard said, and Michelle smiled before realizing that he was talking to Murphy and not her. If you have some love to give, you better do it before life takes it out of you. Boy, girl, who cares? Michelle expected better from someone in uniform and turned to appeal to Leaflet Girl instead. Then they heard a god-awful cackle and wheeled around to see Murphy laughing at them. She held Michelle's gaze, burning her pupils. Come on, Murphy. Michelle broke the stare and turned to head into the store again, this time grabbing at her shoulder. Murphy pulled away too quickly, tripping over the curb and falling hard onto the asphalt. Oh my gosh, are you all right? Leaflet Girl scurried over to help Murphy up, but she waved her off. My fault, I'm fine, she repeated, pushing herself onto her knees, doubled over. The three looked down at her, and for a moment Michelle was sure she was about to be sick. But instead, Murphy let out another unsettling cackle and crawled to her feet, wiping her hands on her ripped jeans. Hand sanitizer? Leaflet Girl offered, glancing at the bright red scrape on the palm of Murphy's hand. Nah, the germs are good. Builds immunity. Murphy smiled, but held her wrist all the same. Good. Well, come on then, Michelle stammered, clearing her throat and walking inside. Why do I need to be in here with you? I'll just go by the trash can, I don't mind, Murphy said, reaching to pull yet another cigarette from her pocket. No, we're here for you, Murphy. You're the one who has an interview. Michelle could hear the shake in her own voice, but she didn't care. This woman had been staying under her roof, eating her food, corrupting her children, and now they were here to spend her money. But this woman would rather argue with people about things she didn't understand, or stand around smoking by a trash can. A secret part of Michelle begged for Murphy to open her mouth and say something stupid. But inside the store, away from her audience, Murphy was sulky and detached again. Michelle rolled her eyes at the dramatics and forged ahead. When had Noah ever played the trumpet for Murphy anyway? He never practiced at home anymore. Inside the clearance section, Michelle distributed blouses, skirts, dresses, and shoes, pairing the most sensible outfit she could. There was something soothing about sorting through the mess of a clearance section that cooled her blood. Her hands expertly grabbed the top of each hanger and slid down the garments, separating them from the ones behind. She needed something classy. There had to be a way to both age Murphy down, but also make her seem more mature. Girly but competent, elegant but not pretentious. Florals would be too childish, sweaters would make her look dumpy. Finally, she found a blue tie-neck blouse with long, billowing sleeves. On the wrong person, it might look tacky. It needed dark slacks to ground it. Ooh, and black heels too. Those were non-negotiable. Black heels go with everything. The poison coursing through Michelle's veins ebbed away as she paired outfit after outfit, sending Murphy into the fitting room with one at a time, nodding when each worked as she predicted. It was a good feeling, judging these outfits without having to say a word, like she was a warden meandering down a concrete hall lined with cells. Satisfied with a near-complete job, she took half the pieces from her sister-in-law and led her to the checkout. They stopped at a few more tables on the way, and Michelle nabbed some sample bottles of her favorite moisturizers and makeups for Murphy to try. When they reached the cashier, she smiled the first unforced smile she had experienced in weeks. The dissonant beeps of the checkout scanner were like the rhythm of an EKG, reminding her that she was still alive, and she tapped her Amex to the beat. As they stepped back into the dense air, Michelle noticed that both Leaflet Girl and the security guard were gone. A single flyer remained, stuck in a small spiral of wet wind and grass clippings, floating up and around in the parking lot, always doing the same double loop just before it touched the ground. She looked around once more, but with no one else in sight, at least she wouldn't need to worry about apologizing for her sister-in-law again. Michelle looked ahead to see that Murphy had kept walking, stepping through the miniature cyclone, breaking the flag from its pattern, and setting it off to the wind. The car ride home was scored by the well-nourished rumble of Michelle's minivan and the occasional honk for an impatient snowbird, hurrying off to fry themselves at the beach. The noise of the road sounded as sweet as the perfume counter smelled, and at every intersection she braked gently to keep the bags from slipping off the back seat and onto the car floor below. Was Noah really that funny? When he was little, he was. Whenever the old Sherwin-Williams commercial would come on, he would dash from whatever room he was in to stand at the TV and sing along. And whenever a song he liked played on the radio, he did that same silly chicken dance, flopping one bent arm and turning in a circle. Once, when they were visiting her family, her grandmother had warned Noah and Joel that she would probably be in heaven the next time he visited. As they drove off later that day, Noah rolled down his window and hollered, "Bye, Nana! Sorry you're going to heaven!" Michelle couldn't remember the last time she had laughed that hard. As she approached the exit, Michelle paused to look at the reflection of the shopping bags in the back seat. The gleaming white plastic adorned with red stars crinkled melodically with the gentle sway of the car. As the sunlight moved across the back seat, she could picture a similar scene from over 13 years ago, driving home from Macy's with bags of baby clothes and a brand new car seat behind her, heading towards the same exit, and glancing back to check on her precious cargo again and again. Michelle's eyes snapped to the present, as with a sudden jolt, the minivan's left wheel slipped off the edge of the road and slid the vehicle into the guardrail. Murphy screeched at her sister-in-law, who was doing her best to regain control of the steering wheel and pull the car back onto the curving downward slope of the exit. A sudden low pop, followed by more grinding, told them that one of the off-road wheels had just blown out, and they were once again pulled into the railing. The jolt sent ripples of shock through Murphy's bones, and she felt the muscles in her neck seize up, desperately trying to help her pull the car back onto the road. "Brake, you stupid bitch!" Murphy wailed from the passenger seat. Her arms were stretched out like vines, grasping for something, anything to ground her. Michelle complied. She slammed on the brakes and jerked the wheel as far right as she could manage. As the car lifted and began to flip midair, Michelle watched the shopping bags through the rearview mirror once more, levitating far more gracefully than her sister-in-law was. She loved the way those white bags floated, and felt her mouth ease into a smile as a half-dozen tubes of makeup and lotion slipped out of the plastic. Like a piñata at a child's birthday party, they tumbled through the thick air, spinning and reflecting the light off their metallic caps, more dazzling than a disco ball. The van seemed almost peaceful then. Even the small digital clock on the stereo was too hypnotized by the scene to push time forward. The two women hung there, with their hair held in place by the torque of the airborne car. In fact, Michelle was certain it would have been completely serene, if not for the still flailing arms in the seat next to her. She caught a glimpse of the scrape on Murphy's hand as it floated from the armrest to the ceiling. Michelle's eyes moved to her face, expecting to see Murphy screaming, and indeed her sister-in-law's mouth was wide open. But the look on her face wasn't one of terror, but unbridled glee. Her arms raised as if they were heading through a loop on her favorite roller coaster. All sound vanished in Michelle's mind, though she was certain if she could hear, her ears would be filled with that horrid cackle again. Instead of staring at the road in shock, as she should have been, Murphy's eyes were locked onto Michelle's, shining with an untamable gleam. It made Michelle feel as though she had lost some sort of match. She hadn't even known she was playing. She blinked faster, desperate to move time along and break the gaze. But Murphy's stare held her fast, refusing to let her escape. And as the car landed on its roof, Michelle wasn't sure if anyone would ever find out that she had lost, but the two of them would know. Thank you.
So good.